Nikolai Zherefan, the chair of this event. Just welcome first to the housing building in the University of Dundee, in sunny Dundee. As you can see, weather today is fantastic, not like in Edinburgh and Glasgow. This is because we are the sunniest city in Scotland, statistically, and in reality today. We'll tell a few words about this event, which we do annually. It's organized by an organization called the International Biodiscovery Federation and the Biodiscovery Journal. We're just a group of around 80 people from different countries, from quite a few countries, and we gather every year in different locations, been twice in Dundee, to discuss interesting topics. The previous time when we were in Dundee was the same place 2 years ago. Some of you were here. We focused on drug discovery and development, and we have very heavy presence from research groups, mostly from America, around the world. This year the topic is slightly different. We want to expand more into teaching and innovation and discuss how we can integrate research, teaching and innovation. I want to take some time to thank you the sponsors of this event. But the Biodiscovery Journal, you probably don't know much about this journal. Some of you know. It's an open access journal published in Scotland with editor-in-chief Professor David Lane. And those of you who are opening the website and you've been here the previous time, you find out that it's a very innovative journal. Make it very easy to write, not say to publish, to write articles. Of course, we have to have results, first of all. But once you have the results, the article actually writes itself with an innovative software. Basically, you put your results, your references into the software, it arranges them into a nice paper. It's very easy for people to collaborate online. If somebody comes, a supervisor or another student, who want to add another figure or remove a figure or add a reference, the paper rearranges itself automatically, which saves a lot of time. If you have a reference to a figure in the text and you remove the figure, it urges you to remove all these references. So it's a take away all this tedious task of rewriting papers, adding, removing references. Citations are going up. Next year we're going to have an impact factor. We have papers which are cited hundreds of times because of the open access character of the journal. So that's our main sponsor. And the other, because this is our sponsor, we should not going to have a technology presentation because we had one last time 2 years ago in the same room. We want to bother you again. And the others are companies which are going to have technology presentations. You can hear today from Dynamic Biosense, a very interesting presentation, how to measure and quantify protein-protein interactions, a topic a lot of us, those who are involved in drug discovery and development, are very much interested. So this is all about the event. We call it the Congress. Why? Because we cover a wide range of interrelated topics, and international because we normally, and like now, have representatives from different countries. They want to skip a country, but we have obviously people from the UK. We go around and we have Italy, we have Germany, we have Netherlands, we have Bulgaria and Russia. What else? That's it. Nigeria. So yes, I knew I went to be some important country. Last time I missed United States. So that's, and we keep the format around 80 people. We have this time, again, registered around 80 people. Some of them are here. The reason for that is to allow people to really interact for these 3 days, talk to each other. Because we've been to huge conferences with 11,000 people. It's impossible to find the person you want to talk to. Here we have statistical chance to meet important people like Sir Peter Downs, last time we have the chance, delegates have the chance to go and touch them, talk to them and ask them questions, which will not have this chance if you go to the ASCR in Chicago. Because it will be mixed with another 11,000 people. So you need a chance to talk to the keynote speaker. So with that, and this year is a very balanced conference. We have representatives here from the teaching staff, people who teach biology or medical sciences in university and high schools as well, from 5. We have researchers, and we have 9 companies that we represented here, 4 from Dundee and 5 international, which are going to talk about their innovations. And normally these meetings result in new friendships, new contacts, and new grant application. So with that introduction, I want to say a few words and introduce the keynote speaker this year. And my class is very, very easy because it doesn't need introduction in Dundee, but not only in Dundee. This is the principal of University of Dundee, Professor Downs. Everybody knows him. He's been here for 30 years. Okay, so we know him for at least 20 more years. And he's one of the people who have been instrumental in changing the very fabric of the city. You can see, and some of our generation can see it happening in the last 30 years, from German journalism to really a city of many discoveries. And a lot of these discoveries taken place in this university. And he's in a unique position to discuss a complex issue like integrating research, teaching, and innovation, because he's been part of that for many years. So without further ado, if I can pass the word to Professor Sir Peter Downs.
Thanks, Nikolai, and thanks also for yours and Danielle's friendship over many years we've known, and it's great to be here to speak to this audience. So let me give you a bit of an introduction and some context. So what I want to talk about, what I want to convince you, is that unlike many universities that describe themselves in various terms, commonly research-led teaching institutions, and define that with usually a mission statement, which says in more complex words, we are a research-led teaching institute. If you look at the websites of most universities, that's what you'll find. You can just reinterpret the mission statement in terms of we do research and we also teach students, and that's our mission. So I want to convince you that we're a bit different here in Dundee, and that the University of Dundee puts innovation at the heart of everything it does. It puts innovation at the heart of its research, and it puts innovation at the heart of the education it provides for its students. Now, many people misuse the word innovation. Actually, it's got quite a broad definition, so sometimes it's hard to pin it down. But it does not mean simply doing things in new ways, or doing new things, or exploring new ideas. It actually means that plus the application of those new ideas and new ways of thinking in some way. So what I mean when I talk about innovation-led biomedical teaching and research, I mean that our research and the students who graduate from this university go on to have an impact in the world beyond the university. And it's our goal to try to do everything we can to enhance that, enhance the prospects of the fantastic research that we do here and the fantastic students who graduate from this university to go out and have an impact in the real world. A bit of broader context, because the nature of this conference means that I'm going to focus on the biomedical. In fact, primarily, because it's my expertise and I'm passionate about it, the bio, but there will be some medical as well. But a broader context is that the university is a relatively broad-based university. It's of medium size by UK standards. In order to make that work, whilst we have a broad base of disciplines, we actually focus very sharply within those disciplines and have fantastic expertise in a very narrowly focused set of areas. So in the biosciences, for example, we have a research institute up the road that has nearly 1,000 people working in it. Principal investigators, PhD students, postdocs, support and administrative staff, and so on and so forth. There are about 80 research active principal investigators, generating about £50 million a year of research income to support what they do. But they're very, very narrowly focused into the molecular and cellular basis of the organisms that are being studied. And that provides a really intensive and active research environment where many of the ways of thinking and approaching research can be shared and the resources and facilities can be combined in imaginative ways. But the real advantage of being a broad-based university from a discipline point of view is it opens up the possibility for those disciplines to interact in very productive and synergistic ways. People talk about interdisciplinary research and teaching. It's very seldom practiced in a very integrated way, and that's also an important objective that the university has. Overall, we have about 3,500 staff, around 18,000 students. We have a turnover of £250 million a year, and that translates into economic impact in our region to around about 750 million, £750 million of gross value added impact on our regional economy. And given that our region, depending on how you define it, our city and city environs has a population of around 250,000, this university effectively put £3,000 into the pockets of every man, woman and child in our region. And that gives us a fantastic status, if you like, but going with that comes an enormous responsibility for our region. And we believe that the university should be one of the most potent forces for economic, social and cultural regeneration of our city and region. And I think there's plenty of examples of how that happens. So if I can, with that contextual background, let me tell you where this kind of idea around innovation-led activities has its origins, at least from a strategic perspective. It has many other origins at the level of individuals, but from a strategic perspective, this started about 6-7 years ago when we developed our strategic plan for what was then the subsequent 5 years. That period came to an end over a year ago, and we're now in our second version of a strategic plan that builds on this simple idea. And so this was the abandonment of a mission statement to define what we do, and instead to talk about why we do what we do, what it's for, what's a university for, what's this university for, what are the specific purposes that we engage with. And after lots of discussions with various groups of people across the university, we decided it was pretty straightforward. It's really simple what we do and why we do it. And we've always done it. But we just needed to understand that that's what we were doing and then really ensure that all of our efforts were focused on doing that in the best way we can. And that is to transform lives. Now, we qualify that by saying we do it locally and globally. And if that sounds a bit Brexit-like in terms of having your cake and eat it, I'm going to describe what I mean by that in a second. Obviously, there is the fact that we do that through the creation of knowledge. That's research. We do it by sharing knowledge. That's publishing our research, that's working with partners, and it's also by teaching students and educating students at the cutting edge of our understanding. But crucially, we want that knowledge to be applied. And we want to make sure it is utilized for the good of our city and region and for society globally. The local and global bit is kind of interesting. If you like, it comes from a statement by Patrick Geddes, which talked about thinking globally and acting locally. We are a global institution by any measure. We have staff and students currently from around 50 different nationalities around the world. Our teaching covers every continent. We even have somebody who accessed a MOOC from the continent of Antarctica, which for us was a first, but every other continent is represented in what we do. Our alumni are now based in 80 different countries around the world. And so, if you like, the tentacles of influence of our university are genuinely global in any way you want to describe that word. And the community of scholars, of students, and of people building the future of our city is drawn from a talent pool from at least 50 different countries. So, so we are global, but if you look around you and look at the impact and remember those figures about the scale of the university and the scale of its economic impact in the region, we clearly have a massive impact locally. And it's very important that we do everything we can to use that global influence to focus efforts on our local region. And so that actually is a very good way to describe what we as a university do, what we aspire to do better, and what I hope we will be doing for a long time in the future. And so if we're about transforming lives, we felt we couldn't do that without transforming ourselves. And so these are just a few of the, if you like, the performance indicators at a strategic level for the university over the last few years that have resulted, I think, in large part from the adoption of that core purpose and by the motivation of our staff and our students behind that way of thinking. So we achieved the accolade of being Scottish University of the Year for 2 years running in 2016 and 17, and followed that up in 2018 by being shortlisted for the UK University of the Year. And that's based upon really strong and consistent statistics in things like the National Student Survey and student experience measurements, which places consistently in the UK's top 10. In international student data, we've been #1 in Scotland in the International Student Barometer, which measures, or attempts to measure, gets information from our international students of many universities in the world on how those students feel about the universities that they have studied in. And we've been #1 in Scotland now consistently for the last several years. We're also a young university. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last year, having separated from the University of St Andrews in 1967. And for the last 3 years of that 50 years, we were #1 in the UK higher education world under 50 measurements. So I think the university has used that, sort of those inspiring qualities to ensure that staff and students are both loyal to and inspired by what they can achieve through their efforts in the university. That's not universal, but I think there's been a sea change in that way of thinking over the last several years, and something that many of us, I think, are rightly proud of. The other key point, and this is about how we focus on the impact of what we do, is we define 4 thematic areas in which we carry out research, which require us to bring together the work from different disciplines to tackle generally global and complex problems. And so these themes combine basic, translational and engaged research, as well as innovative practice in the various professional disciplines that we also teach within the university. Importantly, we're able to work across boundaries, and we restructured the university about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, into a school-based structure in which the clear objective was to lower the barriers between the academic compartments within the organisation to encourage working across disciplines. That's a work in progress, but there are many examples of where that is beginning to work well. And that interdisciplinarity is very often, in many universities, it's talked about in terms of research, but for us, it absolutely has to influence our teaching and the learning environment for our students. Again, I've talked about the local to global interest of what we do, but we see ourselves as a modern university, but we're working on solutions to problems, and particular problems that face the world in the 21st century. And so that allows us to focus in again on applying our activities in these 4 thematic areas that relate to improving health and well-being, to creativity and design, developing innovative technologies that are designed to solve complex problems, and in promoting social change that will enhance diversity, justice, and the socio-economic prosperity. So those are things that allow all parts of the university to see themselves in the context and the light of solving problems and relating both their research and their teaching to those problems and their solutions. So let me give you one story in the biosciences that relates to this. And it is the story of how we may one day quite soon, be capable of eliminating malaria from the world. It starts with our interest in working with the pharmaceutical industry to turn the knowledge we create from basic bioscience research, very much at the molecular and cellular level, into ideas for how we might treat and diagnose disease. And the problem with that was that the pharma industry historically, although it's changing a little bit more recently, has not had the financial motivation to develop drugs that could be useful in the developing world. And because we had a lot of research, particularly in the area of parasitic disease, and I'll say one or two things about that later, where the prevalence of those diseases and the need to treat them were primarily in countries that could not afford the cost of those drugs in terms of the whole development program and so on and so forth. We decided that we needed to develop our own capacity internally within the university to take our basic research through 2 or 3 stages of translation in the drug discovery process. And we call that the drug discovery unit. It now operates at the level of a small, well, actually medium-sized biotech company. It's funded by grants from a variety of organizations, from large charities like the Wellcome Trust and the Gates Foundation, from charities devoted to treating tropical diseases, from other forms of funding, and from the university's own investments in it. And this capability allowed us both to tackle diseases that weren't being tackled by the pharma industry for the reasons I've said, but also to devote some of its capacity to creating drug discovery activities that can fuel financially other areas of activity. So it's divided between tropical diseases and diseases that might be are important and financially potentially important in the developed world. And our biggest success to date, but not by far our only one, is the development of this compound here. And this compound in animal models has remarkable effects. As illustrated here, it has the potential to treat malaria with a single dose, to prevent the spread of malaria from infected people, and to protect the person from developing the disease in the first place. That's what it does in animals. It's currently now first in man and being developed through a variety of partners involving the sort of philanthropic side of some pharma companies, as well as the various charities that I mentioned earlier. And so this, of course, received a huge attention when the initial paper was published in Nature and got us into all the sort of major news agencies as indicated there. It's not all the only story, and I'll tell you more stories that are emerging from the drug discovery unit shortly. So I think that's a great way to illustrate how this way of thinking around innovation and making a difference in the world and transforming lives comes together in the real work that universities like ours do. So if I can move on to give you some other examples. This broadens it out a bit from the biosciences, but I'll come back to biosciences again in a minute. But these are just a few of the other ways in which we develop impact from our research using knowledge exchange, and various consultancy partnerships. And that includes a relationship with an organisation called Rotermead, and that's to do with material science. What we do is we provide flexible access to the university's unique facilities and technical expertise. We had an initial 3-year agreement that was then renewed and is now still in place. And there are various collaborations on innovative activities, including 2 knowledge transfer partnerships. The second one there is a relationship with Scottish and Southern Energy, and that's a knowledge transfer partnership. And that's to do with, it's an interesting project, but it's about the high degree of impact that things like weather and other kind of problems interrupt supplies of things like water to households, how they have a disproportionately large effect on poor populations, and how we can mitigate some of those effects in a variety of ways. And then the third one, illustrated here, is one of my favourites, primarily because it got me on a trip to CERN to see the Large Hadron Collider when it was decommissioned for various maintenance work, and that allows you to get down into literally the bowels of the Earth, where some of, well, the largest and most expensive experiments in the world are being carried out. And we now have a collaboration with CERN on their CMS experiments. And that's based upon material science research that we do here in the university. And what's really amazing about this is that we've developed, through the work of Professor Amit Abdelban, a means to coat the inner surface of the accelerator tube, which runs for several kilometers around Geneva, and particularly the parts where the experiments are detecting new particles. And the problem with the sensitivity of the Large Hadron Collider is that you get a build-up of electron clouds that obviously lessen the vacuum, and that massively changes the sensitivity of the experiments. And so most of the power, which is about, I can't remember exactly what it is, it's something like, the same, all of the power that's required to power the city of Geneva for about 6 months or something like that. It's on that scale. But most of that power is about driving the vacuum down to the lowest possible level to run the machine as efficiently as possible. The next generation of the Large Hadron Collider would use so much energy in its current form that it would be unfeasible. So they need a solution to the tendency to generate and propagate electron clouds within the machine when it's running. And what our scientists have done is develop a surface coating approach that prevents that propagation. First of all, it absorbs the electrons that are being produced, and it then prevents their propagation. And it's a fantastic solution to this problem, and will allow, if successful, the next generation of the Large Hadron Collider to function at minimal change in the energy costs of the experiments. And it's sort of interesting because a lot of these things that's great science, great material science, but I talked a little bit about innovation and what it means. So innovation means finding practical solutions as well as doing new and exciting things. So the real practical solution here is developing a little machine that runs up and down this thing to do the coating. And that actually took as much time and effort and ingenuity as the development of the material itself that will do that work. So it's a good way to illustrate what innovation really is. It doesn't end with the exciting new result. It only gets you where you need to be if you can find a practical way to make use of that knowledge. So that excites me quite a lot. So turning back into the biosciences again, here are some of the new and exciting spin-out companies that have been developed recently. The first and probably one of the most exciting of these is Exscientia. And that is a fantastic synthesis of, if you like, drug discovery together with machine learning and artificial intelligence. That company was established by Professor Andrew Hopkins, who's the CEO, in 2012. And in 2017, it got major funding of £15 million from Wbdc. And it looks like it's going to really now accelerate in its growth and development. So that's a really exciting thing for Dundee and for the university. The second one comes back to that area of tropical diseases. And this is not a drug, but it's a diagnostic kit. And many of you will recognize human African trypanosomiasis, or HAT, that's African sleeping sickness, and affects many people in sub-Saharan Africa and livestock. And one of the key, although the treatments for it are actually almost as dangerous as the disease itself, but one of the key things in actually providing treatment and interfering with the disease process is to be able to detect it early. And so the diagnostic kit, which sells, here's the interesting point, for $50 a shot. Nobody's going to make any money out of that, but a lot of people's lives are going to be improved and saved as a consequence of it. And it's why we need the convening power of universities to bring together our expertise with those who have funds to support the development of this kind of product that can serve these communities. And then the last one is a great example of our university, some of its long-standing expertise in understanding diabetes. Diabetes is now an epidemic proportion throughout the world, and primarily from the growth of type 2 diabetes and its relationship to lifestyle. And this is actually a tech product that develops an online self-management platform and allows people to manage their diabetes in more proactive and useful ways. Amazingly, most people with type 2 diabetes, certainly in the early phases, can treat themselves. But they need to know how to do it, and they need to be encouraged to do it, and they need support. And so My Diabetes, My Way is making a really big and important intervention in helping people to manage the disease. Well, I talked about, this sounds like I'm really just talking about research. So let's turn a little bit to teaching and education, because that's much of what most universities do. And one of our chief products are the graduates that emerge from our educational programs. And so I've gone one step too far, because I missed that slide. I'll come to teaching in a minute. So these are the performance indicators that relate to that research environment. Sorry about that. And so in the life sciences, we really are world class. In fact, in many ways, at the top of the world. But within the UK, in the 2014 exercise that determines the quality of research, we were #1 in the UK, and of course that's ahead of Oxford and Cambridge and all those other universities you might have heard of. But that's primarily about the quality of basic research. So what can I say about, and what measures are there that say we innovate with that research knowledge? And a number of these performance indicators talk about that. There are various ways to measure innovation and the impact the university has in innovation. And so the Times Higher Education recognised us as the top young university in the UK for research, citations, how frequently our work is cited by others, and the income we generate from industry working in partnership with us to develop these ideas. 76% of research is at world-leading or internationally excellent standards. That's a fairly standard measure for the REF activity. But these two, I think, are more important. The Leiden rankings that looked at universities in terms of the impact of their scientific research, and this one, which is utterly remarkable, and that is published by Clarivate Analytics last year, which looked at the impact of research institutes around the world on work within the pharmaceutical industry. And in that, University of Dundee is #1 in the world. There is nobody who does that better than we do. And that you might think is remarkable in a city of 150,000 people, but it's true. And it results from A lot of very talented scientists focusing their efforts on doing brilliant research, but also having this desire to see their work having impact. Within that, and just corroborating that, the Nature Innovation Index published in 2017 said we were the best in the UK broadly, not just within life sciences, that influencing innovation. So I think those are pretty remarkable statistics. So now I will, I think, turn to the teaching environment and what it means, what this means for teaching. So many of you will be aware that 18 months or so ago, through initiatives developed by the UK government, there was an exercise to classify teaching excellence within universities on a sort of Olympian gold, silver, bronze basis. We were one of those universities that received the sort of gold standard for our teaching excellence across the university as a whole. And other measures, I've already mentioned the National Student Survey, we're in the top 10 in the UK, and we've been consistently in the top 10 in the UK now for a number of years. This is a really important statistic. 86% this year of our graduates were in graduate employment within 6 months of graduation. That's well within the top 10 in the UK. Now think about that. We're not in London. We're not in the northern powerhouse. We're in a city which has the highest levels of deprivation of almost any city in the UK. And yet our graduates are at the highest levels of employment of almost any university in the UK. So that says something about the environment in which they're learning, the qualities that they are presenting with, and the work that they're doing. That was last year's figure, now 86%. So that's something we're very, very proud of. So if you think that the impact of our research can be measured in things like new company development, citations, and all those other things I talked about there, the impact of our teaching, to me, is about the employability of our graduates. Not just employable within our own domain to replicate the professors and lecturers that have taught them, but much more importantly, employable across a whole range of domains and areas of activities for which their training, either specifically or generically, makes them ideal candidates. And many, many employers that I speak to, whether they're from the professions or other areas, will always talk about Dundee graduates. I'm sure there's the same for Aberdeen as well. We'll always talk about them as being prepared and ready for work, and this is really important to us. So now this is the really bad side, and I apologize for this. I did have a look at it before and realized it wasn't easy to visualize. But this is really, all this is all of these dots are universities in the UK. This is most of the universities in the UK. And the graph is on the y-axis, you have the scoring, if you like, in this teaching excellence framework that I told about, in which we got the gold standard. Within that, there's all kind of numerical indices. So this is about the numerical sort of scoring within the teaching excellence framework up here. So if you're really good, you want to be somewhere at the top. On the bottom is the grade point average, which again is a numerical measure of your performance in the research excellence framework. So research excellence. And ideally, you want to be on the right, over here. And you'll see that there are many universities that are falling behind, in that they're really not performing in either domain. There are quite a lot of teaching-focused universities that have set themselves up to teach and teach well, and are doing a really good job at it, but are not investing significantly in high-quality research. There are those, and these are the ones that usually describe themselves as being research-led, and having research-led teaching. And actually what they're doing is pretty good research, in fact very good research often. They're not translating that into the impact that has on their students, and that's a problem too. And then up here, there's Oxford and Cambridge, and then there's a group here, which, according to the policy blog 1KG, they call them the high flags. And they're ones that, as you can see, are up in the right hand quadrant, which is where you want to be. And that is, they're doing fantastic research, and they're also doing excellent teaching and giving their students a really good deal. And that blob there is us And there are a few other universities that we talk to quite a lot, who we think have similarities to us, that we're trying to work with, to understand and to improve what we do, to maintain our position in that kind of thing. So that, I think, is something to be very proud of. Now,